They stopped calling me by my name at some point. I can't tell you exactly when it happened, but it did. I became Dad in a tone that meant burden. I became Grandpa Harold in a way that meant fragile. I became a chair someone moves to the corner of the room so there's more space to dance. And I let it happen. Not because I didn't see it, not because I didn't understand. I let it happen because I believed with everything I had left that family doesn't do that. That people who watched you work yourself half to death for 30 years don't look you in the eye and lie. I was wrong. And learning that truth at 83 years old in the house I built with my own hands, that was the most painful education of my life. My name is Harold Bennett. I spent 41 years as a mechanic in a shop I eventually owned myself, a small place on Millbrook Road that smelled like engine grease and burnt coffee, and some days like something close to pride. I married Eleanor when I was 26. We raised 2 children in a beige house with a crooked mailbox that I kept meaning to fix and never did. Eleanor died 7 years ago, a Tuesday in October, and the house went quiet in a way I still can't fully describe. But the house held, the walls held, every room still had her in it, the curtains she picked out, the cracked tile she always said we'd replace, the garden she kept going until she couldn't. I stayed. Of course I stayed. Where else would I go? Subscribe if you haven't yet, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know that someone out there is listening. Karen moved back 2 years after Eleanor passed. My daughter, 49 years old, sharp in the way people are sharp when they've learned that sharpness gets you things. Her husband, Robert, came with her. They said they were worried about me. They said the house was too big for one person. They said they just wanted to help. And in the beginning, maybe they did. I don't want to be unfair. There were months when having voices in the hallway felt like something I needed, when the smell of someone else cooking felt like mercy. But help, over time, began to look like something else. Help began to look like possession. It started small. Of course it did. It always starts small. Karen began handling the utility bills because, she said, I kept forgetting. That was partially true. There were 2 months where I was late. 2 months in 40 years of perfect payments. She took that as an opening. Then it was the grocery ordering, because it's just easier online, Dad. Then the insurance calls, because she said I got confused on the phone. I didn't get confused. I was slow. There is a difference. But I let it go, because letting things go felt like grace, and I was trying to be graceful about getting old. What I didn't understand yet was that I was not being helped. I was being managed. Robert had opinions about everything. He had opinions about the gutters, the water heater, the property tax rate, the driveway crack that he said was a liability. He had opinions the way some men have opinions, loudly, without invitation, and with the particular confidence of someone who has never had to build anything from nothing. He walked through my house like it was a project he'd been assigned. He measured things with his eyes. He made calls on his cell phone in my kitchen about things I was not told about. And when I asked questions, the answer was always some version of, "We're taking care of it, Harold." Not Dad, Harold. Like I was a neighbor, like I was someone to be managed through. The meetings started happening without me. Family calls on Sunday evenings that I found out about afterward. Conversations between Karen and her brother David, who lives in Phoenix and visits twice a year, about the situation, which I came to understand meant me, meant the house, meant what to do with both. David didn't push back. David never pushed back. He has his own life and his own debts, and whatever Karen tells him, he agrees to, because agreeing is easier than thinking. I love my son, but I have learned that love and backbone are not the same thing. The first time I was interrupted mid-sentence at my own dinner table, I told myself it was an accident. The second time, I told myself Karen was stressed. By the fifth or sixth time, I stopped counting. I would begin a thought, and Robert would finish it incorrectly, and Karen would nod, and the conversation would move on, and I would sit there with the rest of my sentence still in my mouth, swallowing it with my food. I began to speak less, not because I had nothing to say, because no one was building any room for my words to land. Then came the paperwork. I noticed it first when I asked for the folder where I kept the house documents. I'd kept it in the same drawer for 20 years, left side of the filing cabinet in the small bedroom we used as an office. The folder was gone. I asked Karen. She said she'd reorganized. She said everything was somewhere safe. She said I could ask her whenever I needed anything. I told her I needed that folder. She said she'd get it for me later. Later never came. I asked again. She said she'd look for it. Another later. By the time I pressed firmly, she produced a summary sheet, not the documents themselves. A single printed page with numbers and the word assets underlined at the top, as if that was enough, as if I had not read every original document with my own eyes, as if I had not signed them with my own hand, as if I were someone who needed things simplified. I was being erased, quietly, methodically, with the patience of people who have decided that patience is how you take something from someone without them screaming. The assisted living conversation happened on a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were when Eleanor and I used to watch the nature programs she loved. Karen sat across from me at the kitchen table with a brochure. It had a photograph on the cover. A smiling, elderly man in a cardigan surrounded by flowers that didn't look real. She said it was just something to consider. She said it was a lovely place. She said the rooms were spacious and the staff was attentive and there were activities. She said it like she was offering me a gift. Robert sat at the far end of the table looking at his phone. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. This had been decided already. I was just being notified. I told her I was not interested. She said she understood, but wanted me to keep an open mind. I told her my mind was made up. She looked at Robert. Robert glanced up from his phone. Something passed between them, a look I recognized because I've been reading people for 8 decades, and that look said, "He'll come around." They thought I would come around. They thought the gentle pressure of time and isolation and manufactured helplessness would soften me into agreement. They thought I was already gone enough that they just had to wait. They did not know who I had been. They had forgotten or never truly understood who had built the ground they were standing on. Now tell me, if this happened to you, what would you have done? Think about it. Because what I did next changed everything. I found the papers on a Wednesday morning. Karen and Robert had left for work. I was in the kitchen heating water for coffee when I noticed a manila envelope on the counter. Not hidden, just left there, the way you leave something you've stopped being careful about. I opened it. Inside were documents I had never seen before. A listing agreement with a real estate agency, a preliminary sale disclosure form, and a signature page. On that signature page, on the line that read property owner, was my name, in handwriting that was close to mine, but was not mine. Someone had practiced it. Someone had gotten comfortable enough with their plan that they'd left the evidence on the kitchen counter like it was a grocery list. I stood there for a long time. The water boiled, and I didn't move. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a bird was doing something in the yard. I remember thinking how ordinary everything looked. The curtains, the cracked tile, the garden going brown at the edges because no one tended it like Eleanor did. I remember thinking, this is what betrayal looks like from the inside. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a manila envelope on a kitchen counter and a name that is yours but wasn't written by your hand. I did not yell. I did not call Karen. I did not confront Robert. I put the envelope exactly where I found it. I finished making my coffee. I drank it standing at the window. And I made a decision that I have not regretted for a single moment since. I was done asking to be heard. I was going to act. The following Monday, I called a lawyer. Not the one Karen used for the family estate, a different one, recommended by my old friend Victor, who I used to play chess with on Friday mornings before he moved to be closer to his grandchildren. The lawyer's name was Patricia Weston, and she had an office 20 minutes from the house and a way of listening that reminded me of Eleanor, still attentive, like she was taking notes behind her eyes. I told her everything. I showed her photographs I had taken of the documents in the envelope. She listened without interrupting me once. Then she asked 3 questions, very precise, and said, Mr. Bennett, you still have full legal ownership of this property. What happened here is not just wrong. Depending on a few details, it may be criminal. Let's protect you. Over the next 4 weeks, I became the most organized I had been since running my shop. Patricia guided me through every step. I filed a formal title protection flag with the county recorder's office. Any sale attempt would now trigger an alert. I opened a separate bank account that Karen had no connection to. I contacted the financial institution where she had access to certain accounts and formally revoked that access with documentation. I updated my power of attorney to a cousin I trust, a quiet, reliable man named George, who lives 40 minutes away and has never asked me for anything. And I said nothing to Karen or Robert. I went home each evening, sat in my chair, watched the evening news, and answered their questions about my day the same way I always had. Fine, quiet, tired. They saw what they expected to see, an old man in a chair. They stopped looking any closer. The shift in me was something no one in that house could have detected because it had nothing to do with behavior. It was internal. I stopped grieving the relationship and started understanding it clearly. Karen was not my child who had made a mistake. Karen was someone who had decided that what I owned mattered more than who I was. That is a specific kind of loss. It doesn't make you angry exactly. It makes you quiet in a different way. Not the quiet of someone fading, but the quiet of someone who has calculated every step and is simply waiting for the right moment to move. Robert made one mistake I hadn't anticipated. 3 weeks in, he called the real estate agency to check on the listing progress. He was in the backyard. I was near the kitchen window. He spoke at normal volume, the way people do when they've stopped being careful. He used my address. He used his own name. He said, "We just want to confirm the timeline before the old man realizes what's happening." I heard every word. I wrote it down in the small notebook I had started keeping in my chest pocket. I gave that note to Patricia the next morning. She said, "Good, we may need that." What happened on the morning of the 17th was not dramatic. It rarely is when things are done correctly. A letter arrived by certified mail, one for Karen, one for Robert. The letters were from Patricia's office and contained formal legal notice that the property at that address had been placed under title protection, that all existing financial access authorizations had been revoked, that any attempted transfer of ownership not initiated directly and verifiably by me would be subject to legal challenge, and that the matter of the documents bearing an unauthorized signature had been formally referred to the county district attorney's office for review. I was at the kitchen table when Karen opened hers. Robert was standing behind her. I watched their faces. I want to be honest about this. I felt something watching their faces change. Not pleasure exactly, not triumph. Something more like a door closing. Something like the sound a room makes when the noise finally stops. Karen looked up at me. She said my name. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "I built this house. I raised you in it. I paid for it. I maintained it. And I buried your mother from it. And you tried to take it from me." She started to speak. I raised my hand, not in anger, just to stop the sound. I said, "I don't need an explanation. I need you to understand that I am not what you decided I was." Robert said something about lawyers and misunderstandings. I did not respond. There was nothing to respond to. Patricia had already said everything that needed to be said in language that courts understand. They moved out 6 weeks later, quietly, because there was nothing they could do. David called from Phoenix and said he hadn't known, and I believe that mostly. I told him we'd talk when he visited in spring. I kept that door open because I have not confused the betrayal of two people with the meaning of family. But I was honest with him too. I said, when you stopped asking questions, you made space for this to happen. He didn't have an answer. That was okay. Some truths are meant to land, not be responded to. The house is mine again. The quiet here is different now. It's not the quiet of someone who's been hollowed out. It's the quiet of someone who has come back to himself. I fix my own coffee in the morning. I sit in Eleanor's chair sometimes, just to be near the shape of where she used to sit. The garden still needs work, and I've been out there in the mornings, slow but present, doing what I can. The mailbox is still crooked. I've decided I might finally fix it, not because anyone's watching, just because it's mine, and I still have time. And some things are worth doing right. I did not do this out of anger. I want to be clear about that. I did this because a man who spent his life building something does not simply wait to be erased. I did this because the silence I had been keeping was not wisdom, it was surrender. And I was done surrendering. I have given too much, built too much, loved too much, and buried too much to spend the years I have left being managed by people who underestimated me. They thought I was finished. I wasn't finished. I was watching. There is a particular kind of cruelty in being dismissed by people who would not exist without you. Not the cruelty of strangers, which you can hold at a distance, but the cruelty of family, which finds every open space in your chest and fills it with doubt. I doubted myself more than I would like to admit. There were nights when I sat in this chair and thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I am too old for this. Maybe the house is just a house. Maybe I should make it easy for everyone and go quietly into some carpeted room with artificial plants and a television playing daytime programs until there is nothing left of me to manage. Those nights were the hardest, and I got through them by doing something Eleanor taught me, though she never called it a lesson. She simply did it. She paid attention to small things. The way light came through the window at 4 in the afternoon, the sound the pipes made in winter, the particular weight of a coffee mug when the house was cold. She found meaning in the details, and the details held her, and she held them back. I learned to do the same. I stopped looking at the enormity of what was being done to me and started looking at what I still had. The title to this house, the clarity of my own memory, the name of a good lawyer, a notebook and a pen. Enough. People ask me now, friends, neighbors, Victor when we talk on the phone, they ask if I'm lonely. I tell them the truth, which is that I was lonelier when the house was full of the wrong people than I am now with it full of nothing but myself. There is a loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who have decided you are finished. I lived inside that loneliness for 2 years. What I have now is something different. It is solitude. It is chosen. It is mine. If you are watching this and you know someone like me, someone being slowly pushed to the side of their own life, told they're too old to understand, too fragile to decide, too finished to fight back, tell them something for me. Tell them that the people who underestimate them have made a serious mistake. Tell them that patience is not the same as weakness. Tell them that the most powerful move available to someone who has been written off is simply this: don't be written off. Be quiet, be careful, be exact. And when the moment comes, and the moment will come, be ready. I am 83 years old. I am a retired mechanic. I am a widower. I am the man who built this house, raised children in it, buried his wife from it, and refused to leave it. I am not the chair someone moves to the corner. I am the room. So here is my question for you, and I mean it. What would you do if the people closest to you decided to erase you? Not with violence, not with cruelty you could point to and name, but with patience, with management, with a slow and deliberate quieting of everything you are. Think about it carefully, because the answer you give yourself says more about you than it does about them.